Low, low, low,
Hello, hello, can hear you.
low. See, hello,
Can you hear me?
see, hello. Huh? Yes?
Hello,
Yeah.
can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Can you hear us
Oh,
okay?
wonderful. Yes,
Perfect. Thank you.
super, thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our session themed Decarbonizing the ASEAN Way, Harnessing the Collective Actions of ASEAN Private Sector. This session is co-organized by the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, RCC Bangkok, UN Compact Network Malaysia and Brunei, UN Global Compact Network Singapore, UN Global Compact Network Indonesia, and UN Global Compact Network Thailand. To start the day, we invite the Deputy Director General of the Ministry of Energy and Resources Malaysia, Dato Mohammad Razif, to deliver his keynote address.
Thank you, MC. Assalamualaikum warahmatullah. A very good morning. Sabah al-khair. We are in Egypt. Sabah al-khair. To all of you who are with us in person or virtually. First and foremost, on behalf of the government of the Malaysian delegation, particularly on behalf of the Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources Malaysia, I would like to thank the organizer who has given me the honor to deliver this important keynote about the ASEAN perspective on the interrelation between decarbonization and the role of the private sector in achieving global climate goals. Ladies and gentlemen, let me jump straight to the topic of discussion today. ASEAN's total greenhouse gas emissions have been relatively low. However, as the ASEAN region progresses, this may soon change. Our region's emission level will increase in tandem with the rapid corresponding of social and economic development. The IEA, International Energy Agency, forecasts that energy demand in ASEAN will further increase as much as 66% by 2040. That may not be a good sign, since ASEAN nations are said to be the most vulnerable countries affected by climate change if we do not change our way. ASEAN Development Bank, ADB, estimates that climate change could reduce ASEAN GDP by 11% at the end of the century due to adverse impact on agriculture, tourism, and fishing, along with human health and labor productivity. Another ASEAN Development Bank study even predicted that Southeast Asia as a whole could shift to a new climate regime by end of the century, with the cooler summer months warmer than the hottest summer months. As a result, rice yield in some countries like Indonesia, the Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam could drop by 50% by 2100 from 1990 levels, while hotter weather will push tropical diseases like malaria and dengue fever northward to the countries like Laos, where that kind of disease were previously rare. We in ASEAN, therefore, have no option but to embark on climate mitigation with the utmost urgency. Ladies and gentlemen, often there is a talk about how technology adoption and innovation is at the foundation of climate mitigation action. But both technology adoption and innovation does not happen in vacuum. The crux of the matter is that disruptive technology and disruptive innovation which we see or benefited today were supported by various sectors, including government agencies, the private sector, even NGOs, albeit at different stages before it becomes mainstream. None of this would in fact have been possible were it not for the government-backed research and initiatives in the early stages. For you see, government around the world invest in R&D even before the commercial potential becomes apparent. The private sector, on the other hand, may not have the commercial incentives to do so, especially when it involves new-to-market technologies. Therefore, governments could provide the appropriate nudges for the businesses to develop profitable endeavors and new source of growth. In that aspect, we could perhaps draw inspiration from Denmark. In the early 1970s, following the oil crisis, the Danish government was looking to reduce its dependence on oil by switching to wind-powered energy. As a result, the Danish government introduced policies and incentives for the development of larger rotors and high-capacity machines. Over time, the developmental cost of such turbines reduced considerably, and Denmark as a whole managed to cut its dependence on oil by half from 1987 to year 2000. What we see today is Denmark is the world's largest exporter of wind turbines. Ladies and gentlemen, the Denmark experience implies that our transition to carbon neutral economies should not be a zero-sum game. Rather, it must be a transition which provides a safe and just space for humanity throughout the ASEAN region. Such a transition must ensure environmental sustainability as well as decent work opportunities and conditions for our citizens, social inclusivity and poverty eradication, and no one is left behind in the name of sustainability. In our effort to mitigate the climate crisis, ASEAN nations must be allowed to pursue socio-economic progress based on our set of resources and capabilities in a way that is befitting our aspirations, and perhaps in doing so, serve as an example for the rest of the world. I also truly believe that multi-sector partnerships are key to achieving all that we envisage. Government agencies, businesses, and civil society groups must collaborate towards developing plans and policies that would suit the ASEAN experience. In doing so, we must look to maximize social and economic opportunities from climate action, while minimizing and carefully managing any challenges along the way. Ladies and gentlemen, with this concerted effort, I trust that the ASEAN region will remain robust, both economically and socially, well poised to take on the role as a leading trading bloc in years to come. It is my sincere hope, therefore, that our gathering here today will, in many ways, set the stage for that very outcome. With that, I thank you.
Thank you, Dato Mohammad Razif. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome the session's panelists led by our moderator, Irwan Aman, board member of the UN Global Compact Network Malaysia and Brunei, Esther N, Chief Sustainability Officer of City Development Limited, Singapore, Dan Pathomvanich, CEO of NR Instant Produce Public Company Limited, Thailand, Daniel Purba, Senior Vice President Strategy and Investment of PT Pertamina, Indonesia, and Dato Sharbini Suhaili, Group CEO of Sarawak Energy Malaysia. Let's give them a warm hand. Over to you, Irwan.
Okay, thank you so much, MC. So good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for investing your time with us today on a beautiful Friday morning, either physically or online. So my name is Mohammad Irwan. So I'm your moderator for today, representing UN Global Compact Malaysia Brunei. Today we have an amazing panel on decarbonizing the ASEAN way, harnessing the collective action of ASEAN private sectors, where the focus will be on decarbonization for private sectors. ASEAN is the region, one of the regions which most vulnerable to the adverse impact of climate change. So it is critical that private sectors collectively commit and take action to reduce emission and build more resilient ASEAN economy. So our goal today is to discuss on decarbonization and role of private sectors as a key enablers to decarbonization, taking into consideration ASEAN geographical diversity and challenges. So a bit of the format for today's discussion. I will pose questions to all panelists. So some of the questions will be answered by at least one or more panelists, so just keep it short. It's 2 to 3 seconds. Okay. Sorry, not second, minutes. Listening to Esther laughing there, I know I make a mistake, so it's minutes, yeah? So I think today we have a very esteemed panelist with us, okay? All big shot in each, in every sectors. So representing agriculture, property development, and energy. So I will start with Mr. Tan Pathomvanich, CEO of NR Instant Products Produce Public Company Limited. Mr. Dan is the CEO of NR Instant Products Public Limited, and he is responsible in sustainable and plant-based activities. He's an actor, not actor as an actor, but he's an actor who is loved in food industries. In 2017, became a director of several food companies and the CEO of NRF. His purpose is to transform the food system for a more inclusive and sustainable world, paving the way to green businesses. Welcome, Mr. Dan.
Thank you.
Then next is Mr. Daniel Purba, Senior Vice President, Strategy and Investment of PT Pertamina, Persero, Indonesia. He's he has held many managerial positions before. Mr. Daniel spearheaded Pertamina initiative to allocate US $1 billion to expedite energy transition toward 2030 targets generation mix and to reduce emission towards sustainability. And then sit next to me, Esther Ng, Chief Sustainability Officer at CDL, Singapore, a seasoned speaker at any international conference. CDL is a property-based company. And then Esther has a long gained reputation, right, for carrying her commitment beyond her corporate role and promoting sustainability across sector. So welcome, Esther. Last but not least, Dato Sharbini Suhaili, Group Chief Executive Officer for Sarawak Energy. Sarawak Energy is the largest, Malaysia's largest developer of renewable energy and provider of affordable and reliable energy to Malaysia and Indonesia. Under his stewardship, Sarawak Energy is built upon its 100 years history to advance sustainable hydropower development in the region. We are also progressing in regional ambition in Southeast Asia through a proposed 1,375 megawatt hydropower development in Indonesia, as well as spearheading the ASEAN grid Borneo sector, following the first export to Indonesia, Borneo, in 2016. So let's start. I will pose a question. So it's for all panelists to answer. As a warming up question, what does the call for ambition climate targets meant for ASEAN regional private sector actor? So maybe we can start with you, Esther.
Hi, good morning, everybody, and thank you for having me. And I come from Singapore, and our company is in the building and construction sector. 2 days ago, the global report on didn't share very positive outlook. Building sector has hit a new high in terms of energy consumption and carbon footprint. And the question to me is like, is it possible for our sector to contribute to the global race to zero? My answer is straight away a yes, and we need to even work faster and more effective. And I think in ASEAN we are set to be one of the the largest economy in a couple of decades time, and I think we are all undergoing very rapid urbanization. a lot of buildings, a lot of infrastructures are on the way. And so the more so we need to really put sustainability and green building and net zero as a priority. And for us, we, as CDL, we started our journey 2 decades ago. And in 2018, we already set our science-based target initiative for our carbon emission targets. Setting targets is only the beginning. You have to have a very clear action plan to work towards it, and also annually you have to report on the, to track the performance and also to report it. So for sustainability, it has really exploded into the forefront over the past 2 years because of COVID. The whole world learned that the health of our planet, people, economy, and businesses are all interconnected and all interdependent. So everybody, whether within the ASEAN countries or outside, we all need to work together. And the good news is actually technologies are available. But how do we make it a business case for private sector like us? And there's actually, in fact, the financial and business case has never been stronger. The cost of inaction is much higher now. And we can see that the net zero target is already, connecting all the bankers, insurance company, investors, and they are making million-dollar decisions based on a company's ESG performance. So if we don't do it, you will be screened out by, investors and bankers. There are a lot of ESG funds and also a lot of sustainable finance that we can tap on to accelerate action and to make use of technologies and innovations to fast-track our global race to zero. And we are very happy to work with everyone, within the, the energy sector, because building and energy actually goes hand in hand, and also technology, fintech, proptech. So we work with everybody, and because we are all sharing the same planet together, and to green and decarbonize our operations is our top priority. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. Mr. Dan?
Yeah, so I often get asked, what does a food company have to do with this? We've been so we're the first, I would say, mission-based company to IPO in the Thai Stock Exchange, and we're very much focused on sustainable food, and we invested into alternative proteins across the world. More than 100 startups. We have $200 million under management just investing into the space. What we realized 4 years ago, as we're very committed to decarbonization of the food system, is whatever we do, it's still a positive emissions industry, right? And we had to figure out how would we get to basically a carbon negative, potentially, food industry. And we did a lot of research, and we've been investing specifically within carbon removal. We've invested into a company in the US that's a recipient of the Elon Musk Decarbonization Prize, converting basically agriculture residue into biomass, which can then be stored for carbon removal, or biochar. And so now, why does that have to even do with ASEAN? So if we look at the amount of carbon, right, that's being accumulated, right, we have basically only maybe another 8 trillion tons that can be released and accumulated to keep our pathway below even 2 degrees, right? And so we need removal, right? We don't just necessarily need abatement, mitigation, etc. We need removal, right? And within ASEAN, most of our countries and economies are agrarian, right? Thailand, 14 million farmers. In Thailand, Thailand faces an aging society. Plus, and the most tragic thing is, we probably burn around 17 million metric tons of agriculture residue. That's Thailand. And within an ASEAN framework, we burn, other countries suffer. Other countries burn, we suffer, right? It's interconnected, right? And so we need to stop emissions burning from the agriculture sector. And we need to do that as an ASEAN. If we look at it, if we assume 2 degrees is our path, right? That's 16% more humidity, which means by 2050, ASEAN will lose 1 growing cycle, right? All the farmers will lose, like Thailand peak humidity is 80%, right? So at 100 degrees, wet bulb effect, like the peak humidity peak growing season is gone in Thailand. It's completely gone. Our country doesn't have a national plan in place for this. And this is a fact that's going to happen, right? Which is already happening in India. And so I think as ASEAN, as specifically private sector, we drive the agrarian export sector, right? And we're ignoring agriculture residue burning, right? And that cannot happen, right? It needs to be taken care of. Otherwise, we will not have an ASEAN food security by 2050.
Thank you, Mr. Dan. Mr. Daniel?
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me in this session. So I'm representing Pertamina. Pertamina is the state-owned energy company in Indonesia. So I think, well, we are here at the front, representing food industry, building and also energy. So I think Pertamina in Indonesia, we are responsible to provide the energy for the country. Country-wise, I think now Indonesia with almost 300 million people, and maybe in 40 years later, almost 500 million people there in the country. So it's going to be required a huge amount of the energy in the long run. So even right now, Indonesia already commit our net zero emission by 2060. So Pertamina as a state-owned enterprise, we support this commitment, and also we have developed our pathway and program to reach this 2060 net zero emission target for the corporation or earlier. So I think even lately Indonesia already announced the enhanced national distribution commitment percentage. So I think progressively as a country, Indonesia also update itself to commit more reduction in the carbon emission. So I think for Pertamina itself, we already have developed our clear pathway towards 2060 net zero emission or even earlier. So I think slowly following the commitment of the country, we may be able to set the to reach the target for the net zero emission even 2050. So I think right now, how do we do it? We have been producing oil and gas, and also not to forget that we also geothermal players. And in the long run, we know that this is the transition of energy is ongoing. So we have no choice. We have to manage our portfolio dealing with this kind of transition. Otherwise, we will be disrupted. And I think other stakeholders, as mentioned by Esther, that the financial institution, investors, rating agency, insurance company, they are asking always how do we manage our ESG to ensure that the existing fossil corporation can sustain in the long run. So this is how do we respond to that. Of course, first, in our journey, we already put a plan to decarbonize our existing asset business. How do we do that? For example, we reduce the flaring. We convert using the gas and also renewables for our power usage in our activities, even in the upstream, in the production side, in the refinery, and also in the shipping, transportation, as well as in our retail station. So that's how we decarbonize our existing business. On the other side, of course, we take this transition energy as a very good opportunity for us to build our green business. So even right now, we have already, set up our new entity business that will handle power, new and renewable energy. So this is how do we respond to make sure that our net zero emission roadmap will be taken place. And it is, on the other side also, we already asked our rating agency to see our ESG scoring. So Sustainalytics, as one of the rating agency, the assessor, already assessed us for the last 2 years. And we've been achieving the improvement since last year into this year, even though still on the same medium risk group. But we are the number 2 of the ESG, the best ESG score in oil and gas industry right now, based on the Sustainalytics. And our ambition is to move to the next level of the sustainability next year into the low risk group of the ESG. So this is how the ambition of Pertamina to make sure that our company is sustained. We deliver our net zero emission commitment with a very detailed program and each asset of decarbonization initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Daniel. And then Dato Sharbini.
Thank you, Irwan. Good morning, everybody. Your question was about, more ambitious
yes.
climate targets
Yep.
To the private sectors. What does
Yes.
it mean, right?
Yep.
So I believe that this is a very good thing because it will create focus and as well drive collaboration amongst the private sectors in the region, and as well between the governments, private sectors and public sectors. You know, we need to keep the pressure on as the transition to a green and resilient energy future is becoming a challenge if you look at what's happening around the world today, right? And to achieve net zero carbon emission by 2050, we require the private sectors to play a much bigger role, and we need to have stronger corporate commitment in the region. And you know, a more ambitious target, I think, will drive companies to come up with better strategies and development plan for a green, for low carbon operations. And I think this will be create a more effective and meaningful actions from the companies. And as well, I believe that putting in a more ambitious target will encourage and as well motivate better government policies and framework that will enable all the private companies to achieve their energy transition target. Yeah? And for Sarawak Energy, this means that we will continue with our advancement of transition and sustainability in Sarawak and beyond. We will support the other industries in Sarawak and in Malaysia, and as well our regional neighbors who are also on the same journey with us. You know that we are lucky that we are very fortunate that our government have been very committed towards a more sustainable and inclusive transition for everybody. In fact, their vision of leveraging and harnessing our hydropower potential back in the 1980s has allowed us to actually transition our generation mix from 92% fossil fuel in 2010 to about above 65% hydropower in 2014. So if you look at our emission, our grid transmission emission intensity, that has already actually achieved the Paris target of 2 degrees centigrade. Yeah. So now what we're trying to do is now to push it lower to 1.5 degrees centigrade, and by 2030. And that shows what we can do more with great support from the policymakers in terms of policies and framework, and as well as you know, in the support we have and the collaboration we have with other industries. Thanks.
Oh, thank you, Dato. Before I move to the next question, I think the seating arrangement is quite nicely placed, where the energy sector is on the right and the supplies are the demand side on the left. So I think we start off with the demand side first, Mr. Dan and Esther. So in your opinion, how ASEAN cooperation respond to low carbon transition in the region, and then what can be improved? Because I think CDL, you are leaders in this, and then for the food industries, we really want to know how this can drive the industries, especially food industries. toward this? Thank you. Start with you, Esther.
Well, definitely to accelerate transitions to net zero, building and construction sector is not just operating within a sector. In fact, you don't need to be in the sector. You live, work, and use a building. People spend about 90% indoors. So how you make your decision and how you use your building, it makes a huge difference. So we all have to start from home. And of course, as a developer, as a builder with presence in 29 countries, we are not looking at just our impact within our small, country. We are looking at, globally, what is our impact. And building and construction sector account for almost 40% of global greenhouse gas emission. So with that impact, we know that we are also in the position to drive change. How to do it is really the million-dollar question. So we have to look at how do we design from this, look at the whole life cycle. How do we design and procure materials and also build, using, more sustainable construction materials and also methods. And last but not least, as a landlord, we also engage our tenants because, every building has a long lifespan of more than 50, 60 or even hundreds of years. So how do you operate a building? Make a lot of difference. So technologies are available and more sustainable and cleaner energies are available also, whether it is on-site or off-site. And most importantly is the company has to set a very clear direction strategy following like TCFD, the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosure is very important. I always say that our industry now is very calculative. We look at every kilowatt hours that we spend and account for it and also put a price tag to it. We have actually conducted 3 climate change scenario planning. The price that go with every kilowatt hour is going up. And in Singapore, we have actually pledged for net zero. And we raised the bar just before COP27. And of course, coming with it, there's also a very robust carbon tax increase, the scheme. And today we are paying $5 per ton. In 2 years' time, it will be 5 times more. And in another 2 more years, it will be 9 times more. So that will also add to the business case of why procurer that we should purchase and materials and also cleaner energy in order to really contribute to a cleaner and also more business focus strategy as well. Future-proofing our business is what we need to do, from the way we design, build, and what we procure and what is the impact. Every year we are disclosing the data very closely, and internally we are tracking data, whether it is about energy, water, waste, and almost is the day-to-day affairs, and embracing every internal stakeholder and also our supply chain also to, in this global race to zero. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. Mr. Dan.
So, just, again, the question was...
The question was ASEAN corporate respond to low carbon transition, and what can be improved?
Yeah. So, first of all, as a member of the Global Compact as well, I want to commend the Global Compact. I think they've done a great job amongst the largest of companies, right, to get them to commit. And I think the benefit is within ASEAN, most of the large corporates are either state or they're family run, right? And when you really understand the scope and the magnitude of the problem, you tend to be driven, right? So state enterprise driven also by government policy targeting, and then by families you have new generation, and they tend to be a bit more into what's going on, right? And how they're impacted. And I think, so I think amongst the largest corporates, at least there is a form of commitment, at least. But is it enough? And I think this is where it's definitely lagging, right? So if we look at the food sector, right, it's 1/3 of emissions. Everybody knows this, right? But throughout ASEAN, right? I mean, Thailand alone, we have like 8 million acres of rice land, right? And then rice produces like what, 12% of methane, right? And so what are the rice mill companies doing in Thailand? really nothing, right? There's some government activity going on, but from the private sector, nothing, right? If you look at other commodities, you know, okay, well, they say that they're carbon neutral, but their scope 3 emissions ignore agriculture residue burning, right? Which, as I mentioned, like Thailand alone is like almost 20 million metric tons. And then recently, another rice growing country also, right, is growing rice really fast, right, and becoming a world player, but yet agriculture residue emissions burning is still very prevalent, right? So I think from a food sector perspective, right, from the private sector, right, we will be the last to change. I was at COP, I've been to COP, right, a few times, and the reason is politics, right? And it is the hardest sector to change because that is the voter base, right? And so I think what we need to do to improve, right, is we need transparency of data, right? So we start off with the largest corporates, right? Transparency of data on what's going on. There is no database on emissions burning within ASEAN, right? And what happens within agriculture. Whether it's intentionally or not, there is no real database. And so if we can figure out what's going on within agriculture, what are the emissions burning, what's happening to the biomass, what's happening from an emissions perspective, then all the large corporates, right, can then kind of say, well, okay, we do now need to tackle this, right? And then the government then needs to step in. Like in Singapore, I think is doing great from a climate perspective, right? I think Thailand now has gone from like critically insufficient now to like a front runner with like the Swiss bilateral Article 6 trading agreement. But I think other countries, like governments, need to target more and work together to help like the corporates, right? Acknowledging, okay, politically sensitive, we need to do something, and then put it onto a path where, okay, well, we need to help the private sector.
Thank you so much. Two key points that I'm hearing from both of you: data and transparency, and engagement. Another one. So, and then go to the energy sectors. To Dato Sharbini, what kind of support and collaboration is needed among ASEAN private sector to build greener economy and accelerate progress toward it?
Yeah, thank you. In fact, you know, we in Sarawak Energy, we have been trying to advance energy transition, not only in Sarawak, but across the region by sharing our resources, yeah? And to me, you know, we should pursue interconnections, yeah, or other means to share our resources, where you can share renewable energy from areas which have the resources to places which do not have that. And you know that in the ASEAN countries, the level of transition varies between countries, and that is largely driven by political, technological, financial, social, and environmental factors. Yeah, and ASEAN has many countries with different priorities and different focus. So all of us need to get together to share this, you know, to ensure that we are all moving on the same path in terms of the energy transition and a clean energy future. One of the things that I've been advocating is interconnection. As I mentioned, we in Sarawak, we are now driving the Borneo grid, which is basically, we started with our first interconnection with West Kalimantan in 2016. And that has actually helped to reduce the dependency on fossil fuel in West Kalimantan. In fact, we calculated that it's about a reduction of about 4.4 million tons of CO2 equivalent, you know, by doing that. And we've just signed a PEA, Power Exchange Agreement, with the Malaysian state of Sabah for power export to Sabah in 2023-24. And we are conducting a feasibility study for power export to Singapore as well, to share our renewable energy. But we are not the only one, because Laos recently have actually started exporting to Thailand, to Peninsular Malaysia, and to Singapore, 100 megawatts to Singapore this year. Yeah. So we, to me, that is something that we can do. And the other thing is that for Sarawak Energy, because we have been developing hydropower since 1980s, we can share our expertise in developing hydropower in the region. In fact, currently we have a project with our Indonesian partners in North Kalimantan to develop 1,400 megawatts hydropower there. And to me, that is very much part of the larger ASEAN grid. And we should be like Europe as well, where you have all interconnection between countries, and you can share your reserve margin, and actually you can share all the renewable energy. And we in Sarawak, and Kalimantan, actually, it's blessed with a lot of hydropower resource potential, and as well in terms of solar as well. We can put solar on our hydro lakes, and that is a very good combination because the hydro lakes actually the dam itself is a natural battery for the solar. Yeah? So you don't have to put additional batteries anywhere else. So we are very trying to drive this together with our partners in the region. But at the end of the day, it requires a lot of political will. And that is something that we need to tell our leaders, right? They need to get together and perhaps together form more original policies and framework for us, the private sectors, to be able to work with each other in various countries. And don't put barriers for us to do that. I think if we can do that, we would have a very good future in terms of clean energy in Southeast Asia. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, Dato Sri. Again, political will is quite important here. So now, Mr. Daniel.
Yeah, I think in addition to what just explained, I think ASEAN countries having quite a huge potential of the energy, for example, for gas. Indonesia, LNG, Brunei are the LNG producers, and Thailand also produce gas quite a lot. So I think this is the low carbon, I think as a transition energy, I think is a good potential for this region, the ASEAN region, to reduce its carbon footprint. On the other side, I think in addition to the, the electricity grid, I think it had been discussed quite a long time to establish the Trans-ASEAN gas pipeline. That I think also need to accelerate to ensure that we can share some of our natural resources. On the other side, I think natural-based solution, I think this region, especially for Indonesia, we have so many forests to absorb the carbon emission. So that's, I think, also one of the potential to collaborate among this ASEAN region to develop this forestation and also other land use in Indonesia especially, and also in other countries. On the other side, I think looking at the further longer term, looking at the supply and demand of the energy and also the carbon footprint on each country in ASEAN has a different, some of the countries are short of carbon emission, and on the other side, on the long, I mean, they produce more and then that they can emit. So I think establishing the carbon market in this region, I think it will be a good idea for us to collaborate because each of the country has a different position. So I think it may help this region in terms of establishment of the carbon market in ASEAN. So I guess on top of that, the concrete action, I guess what we understand in terms of commitment, there are certain level. I think I would say most of the country and the corporation, especially the corporate, maybe 70–80% already has their policy. But the thing is, this is only on the policy level, and it has to be improved into the law level. So the law enforcement in each country need to be in place. Otherwise, this policy is just remaining the policy forever. So the law enforcement need to be set up, in all aspects. If I can say, in Indonesia also is on the way. The way we verify, with the way we measure our carbon, that need to be clearly, enforced in each country. And also the regulation in every industry, in food, in building, and also on all other industry has to be in place as a law. Otherwise, it won't be taken place. The next, of course, the one that already, implemented into real action. So I think that what has been doing right now, even though at a small scale, but I guess everybody tried to make their footprint on this, to reduce and to contribute their carbon emission. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dino. You talk about the VCM, the position of the country is important. I think due to time constraint, I think we go to the last question to each of the panelists. What are your hopes of the outcomes from COP27? From property sectors, from food sectors, energy. Okay, start with you, Esther.
Sure, I would like to summarize my hope in ABCD. Okay, A is like everybody must set ambitious target for action. B is like you must create the business value, and to future-proof your business with strategy, with targets, and with really a roadmap for action to achieve that. And C is really collaboration. Every sector can collaborate together, and especially like within the ASEAN region, Singapore has very little or almost zero natural resources. So we will need to tap onto the rich resources of the region, whether it is the regional, the renewable energy grid, or food, supply, and even water and all that. So collaboration is very key. The last but not least, the D is important. Data disclosures and also, digitalization. Without measuring and tracking performance, we can't manage to improve, and also to achieve a real transition to net zero world. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. Mr. Dan?
So our company is really focused on carbon removal, okay? And specifically, how do we stop agriculture residue burning and taking that biomass that would have been burned and converting it into a format that can be used in either renewable energy or carbon removal. And we're building the first plant in Thailand, and we're building the first plant in America. We have this big mission here that we want to do a gigaton in the next 2 decades, and still that's not enough, right? And so I think for this COP, realistically, right, I think what I hope is, number one is there is a collective effort on food, right? There was no food pavilion at 26, right? And I understand there's 3 pavilions here. And so we're working with some groups to really make food a front and center conversation in the next COP in Dubai. This year we just couldn't do it in time. I think the second is around data collection and transparency, and most importantly, making it available across both from institutional investors and then also within an ASEAN framework around agriculture and food. Private sector needs to lead this. We cannot let government lead it, right? Government can signal, but private sector has to lead. Otherwise, we just won't have a food-based agriculture sector soon, right, in 20 years. And then I think the third really is around, hopefully we can, there's a lot of networking and then a lot of companies joining together to make this happen. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dan. Mr. Daniel, what's your hope from COP27?
Yeah, I think bottom line, I think what I would assume that after this COP27, everybody will aware that they have to save the planet. It's not just a jargon, but it is already real in our life that we have to save this planet. I think in real life, we already affected by the climate change in all sectors. For example, in Indonesia, normally we have dry season and wet season. 6 months dry season, 6 months wet season. But for example, this year, 2022, almost all wet season in Indonesia. So that already impact our concrete business. For example, in the oil industry, we always do like drilling planning, that we will maximize our drilling activity during dry season. Because on the wet season, moving rig is very difficult. So we already make a plan, for our drilling this year. But everything is just, gone away, our plan. So it is already disrupt our real business operation. That's one example. I think all supply chain, food industry also already impacted by the climate change. That's already real in our life. Sometimes when we work, we just focus on our sectors. We never think about the global point of view. So I think with this COP27, we'll inspire everyone, will encourage everyone to think globally through what industry they are working with. So I think that's we need to think, and everybody will inspire and encourage to accelerate their contribution to deal with this climate change. So that's what I would expect, that the COP every year will happen, that everybody, all the nations in the global community, to be reminded that we need so many homework to save this planet, not only for us, but for the future generation, and also for the sustainability of the business. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Daniel. Now, Dato Sharbini, what's your hope from COP27?
So I think the speed and scale of transition around the globe, I think if you look at it, we will have difficulty in meeting the Paris Agreement. Yeah. So to me, the time for setting targets and for talking is over. Yeah. We need action. We need to execute things. And to me, every net zero pledge you have must have real action against it. And it's time for us to do that, to move forward. And the second thing I want to mention as well, as a board member of International Hydropower Association, and the CEO, Eddie Rich, is here as well, is that we need to bring renewable hydropower, which actually is the forgotten giant of green energy, electricity, to be at the center of the conversation in energy transition. Yeah? And, hydropower is among the cleanest energy generator in the world. And I think it gives you among the lowest greenhouse emission per unit of energy generated. And it is also the best complement for variable power like solar and wind. And it is, to me, the best option to accelerate the development and secure integration of solar PV and wind into the grid. Yeah? So, and on top of that, half of the hydropower potential in the world is still undeveloped. So that actually is a huge potential for us to accelerate the development and to ensure that we really achieve the energy transition, which IEA says needs more than 85 gigawatts of plus of hydropower to be installed in the next, up to 2050. So that's the second point I have. So I think action is what needs to be done, and I hope that comes out from COP27. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dato. I think just to sum up everything, there's few key similar interests or key points or keywords that I can collect from all the panelists. Number one is all about collective actions, having data and roadmap from Esther's, and then from Dan. In the absence of government policies, private should take the lead, which is why your company is doing it now. Congrats to you. So talking about transparency as well is important in terms of data and governance of it. Mr. Daniel talked about the support from the government or aligned with the government ambitions and towards saving the planet. And then Dato Sharbini again talked about stressing the collective action is important, sharing resources by having interconnected, sharing within the Southeast Asia country, and then again real action in moving forward. Talking is no longer an option, so it's about all real action in moving forward. With that, I think we close this session. Thank you so much for all panelists for your valuable points and so on. Thank you.
Thank you, Irwan, and thank you to all our panelists. Can we give them another hand? Next, I invite Jens Radschinski, Regional Lead of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, RCC Bangkok, to deliver his closing remarks.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. And good morning from Thailand. I truly regret that I cannot be with you in person in Egypt today. And I would like to start by thanking you all. Firstly, the keynote speaker, Mr. Dato Mohammad, Razif bin Mubin, the Deputy Secretary General at the Ministry of Energy of Natural Resources, Malaysia, for your excellent and thought-provoking ideas on how ASEAN governments can to collectively decarbonize the region as an example for the global south. Listening to your perspectives on how governments from ASEAN member states can work with the private sector to meet national and regional climate aspirations, I would like to remind the audience of the UNFCCC's Global Stocktake, the GST, which was established by Article 14 of the Paris Agreement. In emission reduction, adaptation and climate finance that is to take place every 5 years and is beginning next year in 2023. The GST creates an opportunity for a new mode of interaction, governments together with the private sector to share information, knowledge and experience on the steps that are being taken to scale up investment, including private finance in relevant sectors. I would also like to take the opportunity to express my gratitude to the representatives of the UN, to the UN Global Compact Network members in the ASEAN member states for coming together with us today for the of this event. And I thank the moderator and our panelists for the interactive discussion and for sharing your experience on the challenges, realities, opportunities for enterprises in developing economies within the context of transitioning towards decarbonized society. I can say we hear your forward-looking thoughts on the kind of that is needed among ASEAN private sector to build greener economies and accelerate progress towards achieving the Paris Agreement. Ladies and gentlemen, since 2021, we, the UNFCCC, IGES Regional Collaboration Center for Asia and the Pacific, have collaborated with the UN Global Compact to build capacities for network members to understand climate pledges, to take ambitious climate actions. Such opportunities allow businesses to enhance their understanding of how the private sector can accelerate a sustainable transition to a 1.5 degree climate resilient and healthy, including cities, regions, financial institutions, civil and the private sector being a key lever to transform our economies and societies. Finally, I would like to thank all the participants who have joined this event on-site as well as virtually. And I call upon everyone here today to collaborate on common climate challenges, raising ambition in mitigation efforts as well as in adaptation and building resilience. And then confirm in continuation of our efforts, the RCC Bangkok remains committed to support activities and action plans, interfacing governments and private sector stakeholders as countries implement their nationally determined contributions to the Paris Agreement. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you, Jens. To wrap up the session, I invite Faroze Nadar, Executive Director of the UN Global Compact Network Malaysia and Brunei. Let's give him a warm hand. Faroze has been working tirelessly behind the scenes to coordinate this.
Thank you, Adi. Assalamualaikum and good morning. Firstly, on behalf of the ASEAN UN Global Compact Networks, I thank UNFCCC, RCC Bangkok for giving us the opportunity to collaborate for today's session. Also, many thanks to all our speakers for sharing your insights and wisdom today and our in-person and virtual participants. It was an excellent session. Now, achieving the 1.5C ambition cannot be done alone nor in isolation. It is with this spirit that the ASEAN UNGC networks have collaborated with the UNFCCC RCC Bangkok in various initiatives to collectively engage ASEAN private sector to raise their climate ambitions. Some key previous initiatives include having UNFCCC experts to speak on Race to Zero and science-based target initiatives at climate-focused events in Malaysia and Thailand. Moving forward, with the increasing importance of the role of private sector in achieving the Paris Agreement, we the ASEAN Global Compact Networks will continue to seek the support and collaboration from RCC Bangkok to enable ASEAN businesses to enhance their climate actions, especially in the context of just transition. Looking forward to many more collaborations in the region. I end with a key message from COP27 for me. Private sector must lead the decarbonization efforts, even if there may be a lack of policy. Yesterday, I was very inspired listening to Paul Polman on climate action, where he stressed that we must move from formal authority to moral authority. And I truly believe ASEAN businesses can be the global authority for a net zero world. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Faroze, and thank you everyone for joining us this morning. We will end the session now. Thank you.